Hello. How's everybody doing? Computers in building 72 won't detect your aux cord. Not sure. There we go. And it's frustrating. I believe you. I'm not sure why it's not detecting that. That's annoying. Hopefully everyone's having a good Wednesday afternoon. And hopefully we're all ready to jump into some Maya today. Been loving the thumbnails. It's a new thing for me. I'm just messing around, so I'll try to give you something new to look at every week just for fun. It's my chance to be goofy just a little bit, which is fun. Glad everyone's doing okay. Any troubles getting Autodesk to give you a student license, or was everybody able to do that pretty easily? Are there any issues or not too bad? Hopefully it hasn't been too big of an issue. I'm guessing the unresponsiveness means that there hasn't been any problems. Silly goofy Sunday, for sure. I'm good. Okay. Cool. You hate Autodesk. Sorry you hate Autodesk. Well, I think the goal for today is I just want to get in and give you guys, you know, what the title of the video has said, right? I want to give you guys an introduction into Maya. And then we're just going to start trying to hit the ground running. We're going to jump into modeling the first little part of our human. So we're going to start modeling a hand first. So hopefully by the end of today, we'll have a couple fingers modeled. I'll give you guys a little bit of an intro. I'll let you guys, you know, kind of play around with the software for a minute. And then we'll jump right in. Okay. So hopefully not too long of a introduction, but we should be using a decent amount of the time today. We'll talk about a bunch of different tools, talk about, you know, how 3D modeling works in general, moving around the software. The nice thing is that most of you, how many of you have used Maya before? If you've used Maya before, just put a 1 in the chat. If you haven't used Maya before, put a 0. Go ahead and throw that in there so I can just get an idea of who has and who has not used Maya before. Because most of you, technically, if you've followed EAE's protocol, should have had some exposure to Maya up into this point. Go ahead and type them in there. Let's see it. 1s and 0s. 1 if you haven't. 1 if you have used it. 0 if you haven't used it. Okay. Okay. Oh, nice. Perfect. Nice. I'm seeing a lot more 1s than I am 0s, so that's good. Good. Okay. So, I mean, the goal for me, right, is to make sure that all of you, 0.5, used 3ds Max before. That's okay. 1, perfect. So, 2, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. That's good. A lot of you have used it before, so that's good. So I'll try to keep the intro. I mean, the intro is going to be what it is, but for some of you, hopefully it's a refresher. For those of you that have never used it, I'll try to make it as descriptive as possible. Okay. To those of you that have used it, you know, it's either going to be, you know, a refresher or, hey, I've already know this, but maybe you didn't. Maybe I'll explain something a little bit better that didn't get explained. Or if you took it from me in the past, maybe I'll explain myself better this time. How many of you took my 1050 class? Let's do I don't know. Let's do a F in the chat if you took my 1050 class. How many of you have had me before as a teacher? If any, I'm not sure. I've been teaching long enough that I feel like some of you might have had me before, but I don't know. Or if you took Matt's 1050 class, you could put an M in the chat. F, rip. Okay. So a couple of you. I'm in it right now. Sure. Oh, wow. A lot of you have taken a class from me before. Okay. Oh, boy. Cool. All right. Cool. So, hopefully my 1050 explanation of Maya to you was halfway decent. And if it wasn't, then hopefully I can redeem myself here. But we'll jump right in, okay? So when you first open up Maya, this is the screen you're going to be greeted with, okay? Okay, you took Matt's class. That's great. Awesome. Cool. So like I said, this is the screen you're going to be greeted with, okay? And if you notice something, it's a little bit different than, you know, using Photoshop, right? If you'll notice, it's kind of at an isometric view when we first open up the software. What I can do is move my big face out of the way too. Here, let's try this. Can maybe scale this down a little bit. Get us out of the way. So that I'm not covering menus. Okay. So there's a lot of different menus, right? You open up the software. This is the main HUD. Yours might look a little different. I've customized mine here at the bottom. There's a couple of windows. There will be like a time slider, a keyframe slider as at the bottom of the screen. If you want to get rid of them, there's these little dots right here, and they're just anchored. You can pull them off and close them. Anything to do with the animation stuff, we don't really need. So you can get rid of it if you want. But this command bar, I like to leave up because it gives you warnings and file errors as well. So I leave that up. At the left-hand side of the screen, right, if we're just jumping in here, you've got your tool menu right over here. Each one of these little things has a hotkey associated to them, which we'll talk about in just a minute. You've got view windows, which we'll talk about here in just a second as well. Up at the top, you've got your slew of regular menus that you can go through. There are tons of different options and buttons in here. Some of them we will get to in the class. Some of them we just won't. There's just, even with a full semester, you can't get through every single button and what it does, right? To be honest with you, I've been doing Maya for a long time, and there's still stuff that I just don't use inside of the software, right? You just end up using it what you use it for. And if something doesn't benefit your workflow, then it just doesn't get used, right? So, like I said, a bunch of menus up here. Below that, you've got another slew of buttons and menus, a lot of them to do with undo, redo, saving, opening. creating new files. You've got a bunch of object snap buttons, which we can talk about in a little bit. Live surfacing, which we probably won't talk about here in a well, it depends. Symmetry, which we will talk about. Then you've got some rendering options, your login information for Autodesk, and then below that you've got what's called the shelf. Okay, you have your shelf that has different tabs. Each one of these tabs, if you're looking into these, corresponds with what the tab says, right? So if the shelf tab says poly modeling, it's going to give you a bunch of options for poly modeling, right? So I've got different primitives, I've got some different tools and things that I can use for poly modeling. Curves and surfaces is going to give you the ability to draw curves, use different types of booleans and things like that in here, right? Some NURBS, which is a different type of 3D object inside of Maya, which I don't know if we'll use NURBS a whole lot. We'll live a lot inside this poly modeling tab. And then the sculpting tab is going to give you some sculpting options. You've got rigging tabs, animation tabs, rendering tabs, effects tab, more and more stuff, right? Some of this stuff, like I said, we won't really get into a whole lot. You'll notice at the top here that I didn't mention was this little drop down menu that says modeling right now. That means we're in the modeling mode of Maya. Okay. And what that means is that Maya has a set of menus and buttons strictly sort of focused towards modeling. Okay. Maya does a lot more than just modeling, right? It has a bunch of different functions. People use it for animation, rigging, rendering, lighting, all that kind of stuff. Okay. So inside of this little drop down, you'll see that there is a bunch of different words in here, right? We've got rigging, animation, effects, rendering. Okay. The tabs we'll use the most are definitely poly modeling. We'll probably use the sculpting tab, maybe a little bit. Depends. A lot of the sculpting stuff lives over here in our modeling toolkit, which we'll talk about in just a second. And then we might possibly use the curves and surfaces. We'll see. Okay. There's a good chance we'll live in these first three tabs. We probably won't touch anything in rigging, animation, rendering, effects, any of that stuff. Okay. Sorry for my sniffles. I've got allergies today. It's that time of year in Utah. With the rigging, you'll see now that the menus up top here changed. Your shelf buttons don't necessarily change, but the menus up here change. Okay. So if I jump to animation, you'll see that I get a bunch of new menus up here available. Effects is going to do the same thing, right? It's going to give me a bunch of new menus. We are 100% just going to live in the modeling tab. So if something happens and you are working and all of a sudden you can't see the buttons that I'm clicking on, or you can't see things, check this little drop down right here. It could say rigging or animation or something. Make sure it says modeling. Okay. I've had students have that issue before. They're like, I can't see the buttons. It says my menus say something completely different. And then they were in the effects or animation mode of Maya. Okay. So, oh man, I'm dying from these allergies right now. Okay. So below that, you have your viewport options. Okay. So what we're looking right now, what we are looking at right now is a viewport. Okay. You have a bunch of different viewports available to you. So if you tap the spacebar button on your keyboard, you'll see that now I have 4 windows where I just had 1 before. If I tap spacebar, it's going to jump me into this 4 window view. Okay. What this is doing is it's just giving you more access to view your model in static positions, as well as this live isometric view, right? So in this 4 window view, you'll see that I've got view options above each one of these windows, right? So when I had just the 1 window, I have these view options. You can almost think of them as camera options, right? Because each one of these views is a individual camera inside of Maya that's looking at your model, right? So this is a top-down view, a front view, kind of where my face is, this one right here. This one is also a side view. Okay. You have the ability to change these within the view options, which we can talk about in a minute. It's just under view, and you can select cameras or add new cameras or go to your camera settings and change how these work. You also have the ability to adjust how you view certain objects within that view, right? Or within this camera, by clicking on some of these buttons here at the top, right? So you've got the ability to view your model in different ways, the ability to turn on and off ambient occlusions. You have the ability to turn on lights, turn on your texture, turn on all different types of things, right? You have the ability to turn on different view modes for that object, right? Where you have, like, you may have it be shaded, but you have it turned into X-ray mode or something. Okay. You also have some rendering options available to you within these, which we won't use a whole lot. You may also know that I have this little window here up in the corner that's probably not turned on in your version of Maya right now. This is a almost an object counter, or a it's a vertice counter. Okay, so it tells you how many verts, edges, faces, and all those things that you have inside of your model right now. To get that turned on, it's just under your display, heads up display right here. So the display window or display menu, heads up display option here. And then if you jump down to, there's a little checkbox that says poly count. If I turn that off, you'll see that goes away, right? So if I come back here, Windows, or sorry, display, heads up display, poly count, I can turn this back on. I like to keep this on just because it lets me know how big my model's getting, right? It's not a necessity, but it's pretty useful, okay? So that's the top of your screen and kind of this general area of your screen. Over here, these viewport buttons do the same thing that space bar was doing. So if I click on this, you'll see it goes, okay, 4 window mode. If I click this, it just jumps back to our ISO mode. If I click the 2 little window, it's just going to give you your ISO and 1 orthographic view, right? Which is good. Useful as well. Just depends on what you want to do. You also have this little button right here that looks like a list. This is called your outliner. You could almost describe this as like the laundry list of everything that lives inside of your current Maya scene, right? So you'll see we've got a perspective camera, a top, a front, a side camera. That's default, right? Because Maya allows you to hit spacebar and open up all those different views, right? Then you have some default lights that are just kind of built in with Maya, okay? If you have an issue where you have a piece of 3D geometry that you can't find, sometimes you can unhide it or turn it back on or somehow locate it with your outliner. It's just a good way to organize your objects as well as find things if you can't find them, okay? On the right hand side of the screen, you've got a bunch of different tabs, okay? You have your channel box layer editor, which we can talk about in a minute. This is going to give you a bunch of different options based on an object that you have selected. You also have an attribute editor, which is going to give you more options based on that object. And then you have a modeling toolkit. Okay, this modeling toolkit is super helpful. It's newer. I think it's Maya 2018, maybe. I could be wrong. But they dropped in this new tab here that kind of is just a compilation of all of the different buttons up here that they found that people use really frequently, right? So they wanted to give you super quick access to it. So at the top here, it has the ability to shift between object modes, which we will talk about in just a minute. Has you the ability to do like a pick marquee or a drag selection, right? So where you're clicking on things or dragging on things, okay? Has the ability to turn on highlight back faces, highlight nearest component. You can have these checked on. You also have the ability to turn on camera-based selection. You have the ability to turn on symmetry, selection and transform constraints, which we won't talk about right now. But you have the ability to turn those on. You have the ability to mess with your soft selection curve, which we'll talk about soft select at some point. You also have all of these different mesh buttons down here, right? And these ones are definitely ones that we will use. I think we will use all of these in this class. Maybe not connect. I don't use this tool a whole lot. Pretty much all of the rest of these we will use, okay? Combine, separate, smooth, Boolean, extrude, bevel, bridge, add subdivisions, multi-cut, target weld, quad draw. So we'll use all of those, okay? And we'll talk about them in just a minute. So we've kind of talked about all the menus, okay? The channel box and layer editor we'll talk about in just a second. How do you get into that toolkit? It's just a tab over here on the right hand side. You should be able to see it right here where your channel box layer editor lives. You should be able to see it. Channel box layer editor, attribute editor, modeling toolkit, okay? So it should just be over here on the right hand side. Yep, tab on the side of the screen, right hand side. I need like a ability to flash my cursor or something, but I have to figure out how to do that. Yep, it's on the far right. Cool. So we've talked about all the buttons. Let's talk about actually what the software is for, right? And we'll discuss the channel box and attribute here in a second, okay? So if we want to actually start dropping in, yes, thanks, Austin. If you want to drop in a piece of geometry up here in the poly modeling tab, we can click our polygon cube. So go ahead and click that if you're following along or whenever you're starting to watch the video. And now you have a little 3D cube inside of your software, right? At this point, it might be a good idea to talk about how objects work inside of Maya, okay? So inside of Maya, obviously we are in a 3D piece of software, right? So we are now living in a three-dimensional world in here, right? So we have the Z-axis, which now goes back into infinity, right? So previously, when you were working in something like Photoshop, you are just working in the X and Y, right? So you've got, you know, your left to right, your up and down. Now in Maya, you have this Z-axis that is front to back, okay? You're in 3D. The nice thing about that is that it's pretty clear and shows you down here in the bottom corner kind of where you're at when you start rotating inside of the software, where you're at in space, right? So you can kind of mess with that. I'll talk about that in just a second. So drop your cube in. It should just be defaulted to be like this size, okay? Let's talk about some hotkeys and movement just to kind of start moving around the software, okay? So obviously you have your mouse cursor. If you use your scroll wheel, that's going to zoom you in and out of your view, okay? So you're just zooming. It's just a straight zoom, right? Zooming in and out, okay? What grid options do I like to use? I just keep it at 1 Maya unit, to be honest with you. I don't really mess with it a whole lot. Depends. A lot of the times I'll end up modeling without it, but yeah. I'm kind of vanilla with my options inside of Maya. I just kind of leave it what it is. Because a lot of the time, especially when I'm teaching, this grid is annoying. So I end up just turning it off and modeling like this, right? Especially for video purposes, it's kind of annoying to have that grid just sitting there. But yeah. So to move around, like I said, scroll wheel zooms you in and out, okay? Alt is your best friend, okay? Alt is going to be how you move around the software really easily, okay? So Alt and left mouse button is going to pop up with this little double arrow with a kind of a reticle in the middle cursor that allows you to rotate around your scene, right? So we are rotating around. Okay, anywhere I click, I'm just rotating around in the scene with Alt and left mouse button, okay? Scroll wheel again is zoom. Alt and left mouse button is rotate. Alt and right mouse button is also zoom. It's kind of a scrub zoom, so you can kind of scrub left and right with your cursor, okay? Kind of nice. A little bit more precise than, like, the scroll wheel is definitely a step zoom, right? Where the scrub zoom is way more precise, right? So you can just decide which one you like better. And then the last one is Alt and middle mouse button is pan, okay? So you can zoom. Alt left mouse button is rotate. Alt middle mouse button is pan, okay? So with all those, you should be able to rotate around the software really easily, move, get what you need done, right? Just to be able to move around inside of the software, right? Locate yourself in space, move around, pretty easy. Once you get comfortable with how that functions, it becomes second nature almost, right? I don't even really think about it when I'm moving around. I'm just tapping the buttons and scrolling around. I can get everywhere I need to look at an object, right? So get used to that, fly around, rotate around, play with that. Just get comfortable with how that functions. Get used to being in space. Like I could tell you I'm upside down right now. It just depends on how well you get acclimated to being in that 3D space, right? So that's it for movement keys. So I'll go through them one more time, right? So Alt left mouse button, rotate. Zoom is the scroll wheel. Alt middle mouse button is pan. Alt right mouse button is scrub zoom. Okay. Pretty straightforward. So if you need to watch this video back to go through those, hopefully I've said those enough times now. Okay. So let's talk about the objects themselves, okay? Inside of Maya, your object, right, is not just a big like clay cube, right? Inside of Maya. It is built up out of different components, okay? So the components that are used to create this object are as follows, okay? You have the actual full mesh itself, right? Then you break it up. You have vertices, right? Which is everywhere the edges converge to one point, right? So you have vertices. Oh, how do you snap back to origin? F. Good call. So if I'm out here, over here, and there's an object mode, right? And I click on the object over here. If I want to snap back to origin, I hit F. That should reframe that object in the center of your screen. Good question. Okay. So, like I said, you've got your object, right? Main object, you'll see when you're in object mode. So we're going to kind of cover the different modes of your object, right? So you've got your main object mode when it's all highlighted in green. Your object is built out of vertices, like I said, and those vertices are just a single point in space in Maya, right? And those points usually happen where edges converge, okay? So you'll see they're these little pink points here, right? So it's not too hard. It shouldn't be too hard to see. These little pink dots, these are your vertices, okay? You also have edges, which I just talked about. So your edges are everywhere you can see the edge of a polygon, right? And then if you highlight over them, they'll highlight in red. You click on them, they turn orange. So your object's built out of edges, right? Vertices, and then faces, okay? So a face is basically what it is. It's a polygon, right? And when I say polygon, I mean, four-sided, this four-sided, square-looking plane, right? So this polygon right here, okay? These are your faces. The thing inside of Maya, and it's kind of a rule of thumb, is that you want to keep your object in quads, okay? So if I drop in a cube and I want to get a sphere, there's a couple different ways I can do that. But just to show you kind of how objects work, right? If I have a cube and then I eventually want to have a sphere, you'll see that this sphere, right? It's not perfectly smooth yet. I mean, if we smooth one, we could get a more smooth object. But this object, you'll see, even though it's a sphere, is built out of these square polygons, right? So I've got, four-sided polygons. And this is generally your best practice. There are things where that rule can be broken, okay? But to kind of get this into your brain and give you good habits to start with is to talk about polygon modeling, okay? Quad polygon modeling. There are some instances where you can have a triangle, which is something like this, right? Where you've got just a three-sided polygon. Okay. something like this, and you'll see this is a 3-sided polygon, right? I've got 1, 2, 3 edges, or 3 vertices here. Okay, so this is a triangle. In some situations they're fine, in other situations they can be a little bit of a nuisance, but they're not the worst thing in the world. Where you start running into problems, and I'm going to give you a little piece of terminology here, is where you have an n-gon. Okay, and an n-gon is something like this, right? You'll see I have 2 polygons, right? These are quad polygons, but right here, this is an n-gon. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 edges making up this polygon right here, right? This is a no-no. Okay, we try not to model in n-gons. Like I said, there are situations where you can get away with them, but to give you a good practice, try to avoid these at all costs. Okay, in fact, a lot of your grading will be based on that, right? If you have n-gons, you're going to start getting points deducted, right? Because they cause more problems more often than not. Okay, so an n-gon is anything with more than 4 sides in a polygon. Okay, triangles, I'm not going to deduct points for triangles. I may deduct a few if your whole model is triangles, but if you have a couple in there, I'm not going to kill you for points. Okay, because in reality they're not the worst thing ever. But n-gons are a bad thing. A lot of the times your softwares that you use, like if you take a piece of geometry from Maya and try to put it into ZBrush or into Unreal and it has n-gons, it will throw an error at you. Okay, so I'm trying to teach you best practices. Okay, so what we talked about so far, right? We've got our object that's broken up into these polygons, right? And these polygons are built out of vertices, edges, and faces, right? Yeah, UE4 does not like n-gons for sure. Okay, so let's talk about, so we've talked about what your actual 3D mesh is built out of. Let's talk about some hotkeys in order for you to start manipulating these primitive objects that you're dropping into your scene. Okay, so there's a few hotkeys inside of Maya that you're going to want to remember, and you probably already remember them if you've used Maya before. They are W, E, and R. Okay, so W is going to be your move, right? You have E, which is rotate, and then R, which is scale. Okay, all 3 of those you're going to want to remember because they are crucial for you to do what you need to do inside of the software. For you to even move something around and change an object's shape, if you can't remember how to move it, then you're in trouble, right? So W, E, and R, these are your essential hotkeys. You'll see that if I tap those, they pop up over here as well on the left hand side in your toolbox, right? So you've got W, E, R. So if you can imagine, I can move an object, I can rotate an object like you've seen, I can also scale an object. Okay, if you are kind of thinking ahead, like I'm hoping you are, you would also imagine that I can do those same things with individual components. Okay, so like if I have a vertice, I can move one vertice in space, right? I can move multiple vertices in space by clicking and dragging and doing a marquee select and moving like this. Okay, I can rotate, grab just a couple verts and move. I could grab one vert at a time down here. I'm tapping Windows button, hold on, sorry. I can move these individually of themselves, right? And start, creating some sort of weird shape, right? Each one of those colors on that move tool is corresponding to the axis that matches down here in the bottom left, right? So we can move those things around. Okay, I've really jacked up that cube, so we'll drop in a new one real quick. So I'm going to click drop one in. I'm going to hit R, scale this up so you can just see what's going around. If your little handles are a little too big for you to see, you can tap the plus and minus buttons on your keyboard. It'll make them bigger or smaller. Okay, so with this cube, right, I've moved, rotated, we moved and rotated individual vertices, right? Now let's talk about edges. Okay, so if I right click and hold I can click them over here in the modeling toolkit. This is completely acceptable. There's also a menu that I'm going to introduce to you real quick. If you right click and hold on an object, there's a little radial menu that pops up, and this is just really quick, right? It's not that this is slow, like you could click through these pretty quickly, but you can right click and hold and this radial menu will pop up. If you hold and drag, it will allow you to kind of select these things. So I can go face mode, edge mode, vertex mode pretty quickly there as well, right? So if I'm in edge mode, which I can click here, or again, right click and hold, drag up, let go onto edge. I can click edges too, right? And to select multiples of things, I can hold shift, okay? So the shift key is essential to selecting multiples, like multiple vertices, multiple edges, multiple faces, okay? So if I click this edge, I can scale an edge, right? I can move an edge, I can rotate an edge, okay? I can grab multiple edges, do the same thing where I'm, sorry, I keep tapping the Windows button. I can move multiple edges, I can rotate multiple edges, okay? Right, I can scale these edges. So I want you to just get used to that and how that works, right? Something you'll notice is that we are very limited to how much we can manipulate this object, even with being able to move and change those things. Even if we mess with the faces here, we go to face mode and click on that and hit scale. We start rotating faces and moving them, right? We're pretty limited, right? We just have a cube. At the end of the day, we can't turn this cube into anything more than really just a modified cube, right? Like we could drastically change the shape of this cube, but we can't do a ton to it, right? We can end up making some pretty unique shapes and things, but in order to start manipulating this in such a way where we can start creating more unique objects, right? We need to start adding more geometry, okay? So if I have a cube, right, I can't do much more with it until I start adding more geometry. And what I mean by geometry is by adding more vertices, more edges, and more faces, right? And in doing that, if I add another edge, right, I am in turn almost duplicating the number of vertices, not the number of vertices, but the number of faces, right? Because if I cut another edge loop through here, an edge loop is just a term that you use for a edge that loops around your whole object, right? So we're going to talk about a new tool here. So we've gone through quite a bit, right? We've talked about all of the buttons that you see on the screen. We've talked about what your object is built out of. We've talked about movement. We've talked about your different tools, rotating, scaling, okay? I'm going to introduce you into a new tool now that we can talk about, which is adding more geometry to a cube, okay? There's a few ways you can go about doing this, right? This is where the channel box editor and attribute editor are going to come into play, which we didn't really discuss when we were talking interface stuff, right? So if I have my channel box layer editor here, you'll see that there's some options here that pop up. These are they just kind of correspond to the object's orientation in space, as well as its current scale, right? So you'll see that this object is located at 0, 0, 0 inside of Maya, right? It's dead center inside of Maya's space. So you're going to see that all of these translates and rotates are set at 0 right now. You'll also see, because what I did was modify this cube, right? I've scaled it up. You'll see that number changes in the scale in X, Y, and Z axes, right? So if I'm scaling up, you're going to notice that all those numbers changed, right? Because I'm clicking this middle box in my scale tool, right? Which is scaling uniformly, which you can see, right? These numbers correspond with that. If I click and scale in one direction, right? Now you'll see that the scale, right? Because we're scaling in the X axis, which you can see down here in the bottom left, right? Hope my camera shouldn't be covering that. You can see this little sort of almost like compass that's showing you which direction you're oriented, right? If I'm scaling in the X, only my X value is going to change, right? If I'm scaling in the Y, that Y value will change. If I'm scaling in the Z value will change, okay? That's part of your channel box layer editor, okay? Below that, there's some more things in here that we won't really talk about right now, but you also have down here a layer editor that works very similar to the way that your layer editor works inside of Photoshop. Most of you have probably used Photoshop before, okay? So if I have these two objects in here, right, let's say I wanted to separate them into two different layers. There's a little button here where I can create a new layer and assign selected objects to that layer, right? So if I click this, you'll see that this new layer pops up here. If I double click this, it's going to give me some options to edit this layer. I can call this object 1 or something, whatever you want to call it. Let's call this object 01, and we'll leave it there. We hit save. Okay, that's called object 01. You'll see these buttons right here on the left hand side of this allow you to turn off and on that layer. It also allows you to make a layer transparent. So let's say you're working on this thing and you want to make sure that you're not interfering with another object in your scene, or there's a bunch of different applications for this, but there's a transparent. There's also the ability to turn it into a reference, which is nice. In the future, we can also do that with a plane that has an image on it. So we can use those as reference images inside of our scene, right? Which is nice for modeling, which we will do in this class, okay? You have the ability to make it visible, right? So it's nice. You can turn it off and on. You could assign this one to a layer 2, call this object 2 or something, okay? And then I can turn that one on and off. It won't let you put spaces in there, I forget. So I can turn that one on and off without affecting the stuff that's on this layer, right? Which is nice, okay? That's how layers work inside of Maya. The next thing to talk about is the attribute editor, okay? You have the attribute editor, which you'll see if I have this cube selected. I'm going to go back to our channel box editor and throw this back onto 000 here and just make sure it goes back to the center. I'm also going to take this layer and just delete this layer and then delete this object because we don't need it for right now, okay? Turning on and off the P is, I think it's, I can't remember what this P does. I'm not sure. I can't remember what the P does, to be honest with you. I don't remember. V is visible, and then these ones are important. I will look it up and let you know. I can't remember what the P is, to be honest with you. I hardly ever use it. So, yeah, I can't remember what it is. P, what does that do? I'll look it up and I'll throw it in the Discord. Okay. If you go to the attribute editor and click on your object. Oh, let's see. Have that set to a reference. Okay. So if I have that object selected and now I have the attribute tab open, attribute editor, you'll see that there's a bunch of tabs up here. All of these different things correspond to the current object you have selected, right? So it breaks it down into different shading groups, your texture set that's on there, the height, width, depth of that object, how many subdivisions it has. You also have the ability to modify more things of here, like the display type of this object, the level of detail, the shading, different things that you can do to this object, okay? You have cube shapes. This is all different, tons of different options, okay? You have the ability to name your object here. You also have the ability to name it here as well, so you can name the transform or the mesh. You have the ability to change transform attributes through here, right? So similar to your channel box editor, you could say I want this object to live at 1 1 1 here, and it's going to put it at 1 1 1 on the grid, okay? Or I can jump it back to 0 0 0. You also have the ability to rotate it in here, okay? You have the ability to tell it which rotate order it wants to rotate, okay? You can change a bunch of different things in here. Oh, playback. True. That would make sense. I don't do a ton of animation inside of Maya, so that's why I don't use it. You get layers by layer editor, and there's a few different layer options. You can move them up and down. You can create a new layer. You can assign objects to a layer. Okay. Yeah, it's nice. It can be super nice to break things up into layers for sure. Okay. So inside that attribute editor, there is a little tab here that says Polycube 2. Okay. And you'll see that it has this Polycube history with it. This one is pretty big. This is super helpful. And you'll notice that these 3 sliders right here that say subdivision on here, right? You can go to subdivision width and change how many edge loops you start with on this cube, right? So if we break this up and we just give it 2 subdivisions in each direction, okay? You'll notice that now we have an edge loop running through our cube in every direction, right? That we didn't have before with just our base cube. So just to give you an example, we're here. We started with this, right? And I'll turn on our wireframe just so you guys can see things a little bit better here. So if I go to this little button up here at the top that says wireframe on shaded, I can click this, okay? So we have these 2 different objects, right? This one we added a subdivision to. This one does not have a subdivision added, okay? You also have the ability through your modeling toolkit to do subdivisions, I believe, which is where? Don't remember. Is it here? I thought you could do it through here. I can't remember now. Maybe not. It's fine. I don't, to be honest with you, while you can start with these on here, these subdivisions, right? Oftentimes I'm manually putting them in just because it's easier. Which workspace would be best for this class? I sit in the modeling workspace, right? Or mode, the modeling mode. Okay. Yeah, so if yours is not in the modeling mode, you can try that. If you have a couple of different animation sliders here at the bottom, you can just click and drag those off and close them. There should be like a keyframe slider and a like a time slider that you can just drag off the bottom and just close them out. You won't need them. Add divisions is under bevel. Oh, there it is. I'm just blind. Okay. So if I add divisions, you can keep dividing that by 2. You could change how many divisions go in there. So that's a little bit easier than going through the attribute editor, right? If I click on this cube and I just want to divide it once, I can just go boop, there's a subdivision, which is super nice. Okay. So 2 different ways of going about doing that. We can come back over here, throw this back on 0, 0, 0. And you'll notice as we're doing this, now that I have more subdivisions with my cube before, I didn't have the ability to do much with this object, right? But now this cube, because I have, way more vertices to manipulate, I can drastically change the shape of this object, right? I could even turn this cube into a sphere fairly quickly, right? Just by clicking on a few vertices and scaling, right? I can turn this cube into a sphere or into a really different shape than what it first started out as, right? So it just depends on what you want to do. But now that we have an object like this, the manipulation level is drastically different, right, than it was previously. So you can see that adding, just one subdivision already gives you way more control over your object than you had prior, right? With that being said, what I want to do is start modeling the first part of our human, okay? And I'm going to go really slow, and I'm going to take it step by step, and we're just going to work through this, okay? We're going to start with a finger, okay? And we're just going to use the majority of the tools that we've used so far. However, there's one tool I want to show you real quickly before we start. Okay, if you have a cube in here, there is a tool in your modeling toolkit. It's also up on your shelf. It looks like a little knife with a couple different vertices right here. Okay, this tool is called the multi-cut tool, and what this tool allows you to do is cut through your 3D mesh. Okay, you have the ability to create, you have the ability to create edge loops. You also have the ability to just cut in one vertex at a time if you want to. Some situations that can be helpful, some it's not. You also have the ability to like cut in very dynamic shapes right into this cube. So if you wanted to do something like this, and eventually have, you know, an object where you're doing this type of deal, and you have something like this inside. Granted, this is not great modeling. I have a lot of n-gons here, but this is what I'm saying. You have the ability to cut these dynamic shapes with your multi-cut tool. Okay. You could set a project. It's really up to you. I should be better about setting a project, right? Like, and we can do that if you want, but it's up to you. If you save out the scene, saving the scene is fine for me. Once we start adding in like reference images, it might be nice to set up a project, but you can. If you hit set project, all you're doing, right, is creating a new file that lives somewhere on your desktop, right? That's going to save all your scenes into one location. It's going to save, if you add in images, it will store them in there. So if you're planning on moving around a bunch, right? Like if you're planning on taking this project and working on a different computer, then yeah, I'd say set a project. If you're just going to live on your computer and you're going to save your scenes out and you're going to save your images to a folder somewhere, it's up to you. It's good practice to set a project, but like I said, it can be done. So I'll show you how to do it real quick. If you want, you can go file. Sorry, once my Maya starts responding again. Setting a project is basically like saying, Maya, here is a folder path for all of my different things inside of this scene. Okay. Why are the n-gon shapes a problem? I'll give you the reason. Okay. When a model is taken into an engine, the engine does this to it. Okay. The engine does what's called a triangulate. Okay. And when the model has polygons that are not quads, it is very hard to turn them into triangles. Okay. So your model's going to take something like this and triangulate it. The reason why it's not a problem when you have something like this, where there are already triangles on this object, if we triangulate this, it doesn't try to triangulate the triangles, right? The triangles are already there, so it just triangulates everything else. Okay. So that's how that works. When an object is placed into an engine, it triangulates. Okay. So if you have n-gons, how does it take a 5-sided thing and turn it into a triangle? It can't. If it takes a 5-sided object, it can make a triangle, but then there's still a quad, and then it's got to do another process to try to triangulate that one, and they wig out. They don't like it. Okay. So that's why it usually throws an error at you. They can also mess up UV maps and other things too that we could talk about later down in the road. Yeah, the setting a project is just for organization purposes. So let's do it. It's worth showing you how it works, right? So if I do set project, I can go to desktop. You could even put your project here. You can type in, you can create a new folder. Okay. You can call this folder, EAE 3600. Okay. Sorry, not directory. Let's go back to my desktop. Where's that new folder? Let's call this EAE 3600, and you can hit set. Okay. And what this does not contain a project definition file workspace. Oh, create default workspace. That's fine. So now if I go in here into my EA 3600, you'll see that it has the default workspace file. If I save a scene, so if I save this scene, it should save it to that folder. So you can save out that project there. And gons equal bad and quads equal good. Yeah, that's the reason why. So yeah, every time you save a file, it should put it in that project location. In reality, guys, if you are just going to live on your computer at home or on your laptop setting, and you're the only one that's ever going to interact with it, it's really not that big a deal. You can just save out a scene and it will be fine. Okay. The one problem you can run into, like say you have a scene, okay, and you've dropped in some reference images, and then you go to a new computer and you open that file, and now all your reference images are gone. Okay. The reason for that is that Maya has your reference images pathed to your desktop at home, right? If it's just the scene, then it can't grab those, right? However, if you have a project folder set up where you've got your scene, your different scenes in there, you have your images folder, then everything's pathed inside of that one contained box, right? Then it's not a big deal to move between different things, right? I'm gonna skip this song because it has words in it. It bothers me. Okay. So yeah, either way, not a huge deal. If you want to do it, that's fine. When you turn stuff into me, I'm just going to ask for individual Maya files anyways, so I'm not super worried about it. Okay, so we talked about the multi-cut tool. So what I want to do now, let's start modeling a finger, okay? And we'll go through this, and we'll try to run through this. We may even get farther than just a finger. We'll see. We may even get to modeling the first part of the hand. I don't want to throw too much at you today because I want you to be able to watch this back if you need to, okay? So, let's start modeling a finger, okay? So what I first want to do here is drop in a cube, okay? We've got our cube, and I'll make this kind of big just so you can see what's going on. And then what I want to do is take this cube and scale it out, right? We're going to make it finger sized. Okay. Use your own hand as a reference. Really not a huge deal. We are going to be modeling. I'm going to give you guys the options to either model a female or a male. I will probably be modeling a male in the class for you guys. Yeah. Modeling a female is not too different from modeling a male, right? There's a few different body parts that you need to, you know, model based off that. We don't model genitals or anything in here, so we'll just be modeling almost like a mannequin in that sense, right? So, but yeah. But I'll probably do like a kind of a muscular superhero type dude, just because it's fun, and that will be pretty standard. Okay, so let's see. So we've got our extended out cube, right? So all I did to get to that point was I dropped in my cube, right? Scaled it up a little bit. I'm going to scale it in one axis this way, right? To get more of a rectangular shape. Okay. Noodle hands and hyperrealism. I would say try to go more realistic if you can. I mean, I'll probably be doing something a little bit stylized. So if you want to stick to that kind of stylized look, if you follow that through all the way to the end, I'm okay with that. Okay. But I don't know if I do noodle hands. Like I wouldn't just do like a one, like we're going to do fingernails and knuckles and things. Okay. All right. We're going to try to do like a human hand. So we've got our rectangle here. Okay. If you look at your finger, right? You're looking at your finger. your finger is kind of broken up into 3 different sections, right? You've got kind of the tip of your finger, the middle, and then the base of your finger, right? Yeah, we're not sculpting. We're doing it in Maya. So we're sculpting, but not like ZBrush sculpting, right? Okay, so we've built out this piece. So what I want to do is with my multi-cut tool, I'm going to break out this finger into some sections, kind of like your finger is in real life. Okay, so here I'm going to cut. So by holding control, I'm clicking on multi-cut, hovering over my object here in object mode, multi-cut, and I'm holding control. Okay, and you'll see if I hold control over an edge that's running horizontal, it will cut while I'm holding control, right? It will cut an edge loop vertically through my object. If I hold control while I'm on an object or an edge that's running vertically, it will cut a edge loop horizontally. Okay, so you'll notice if I'm here, it's cutting vertically, cutting horizontally. Okay, so I'm going to cut this into 3 different sections, almost like a real finger. Okay, so I'm going to cut here, and then I'm going to cut here. And then in reality, if you wanted to, you could go into edge mode, double click on a single edge. It will grab all the edges in that edge loop. If you hit W, you can move it. So if you don't like where you initially put that, you could move it along here by hitting W after you've done that, right? So if I double click, it will wrap around and grab all the edges, and then I can move. I'm just going to look at it from the top and see kind of if I like how that's broken up, which is good for me right now. Okay, and then I'm going to do one more thing here. Okay, I am going to go into a new tool, which I want to talk to you about. Or actually, let's just do it with multi-cut. If I go multi-cut and hold control and J, is it J? Which one is it? Shift. Perfect. So if I hold control and then hold shift, it will allow me to snap the object along the grid, okay, or the edge loop along the grid. So what I want to do is make sure I'm cutting an edge loop here, right through the middle of the finger, and then I'm cutting one the other way too. Okay, so I'm holding control, holding shift, and I'm just gonna click, right? So I've kind of cross-sectioned that finger, right? Okay, so we've broken it up into those 3 different sections, and then I cut an edge loop through here and cut an edge loop this way. So let's do it one more time. So we've already cut it into the 3 sections, right? Now I'm going to hold control and shift and run it along this edge here and cut one right down the center. And then I'm going to rotate this a little bit. I'll turn off my grid so you can see what's happening. Control, shift, and right in the center of the object running the other way, I'll cut another edge loop. Okay? No, we're not making a unique fingerprint pattern, no. Okay, so I've cross-sectioned this finger, okay? I'll turn my grid back on just so you can see what's going on. I might also pull this up a little bit just so you can see. Okay, so all I did to do that, right, is object mode, click on it, hit W, pull it up just away from the grid so it's out of the way. All right. So the next step here, right, is that I want to add in some joints, right, into this finger. However, there's a couple different ways we could go about doing this. If we wanted to, we could first kind of round out this finger from this point, right? So we could take, you know, our edges here or our edge loops through here and try to round this thing out a little bit, right? Sorry, I keep hitting my Windows button. So we're almost making a hot dog, right? So I'm just double clicking these edge loops and kind of rounding this finger out a little bit. Nope, they're not exact thirds, right? You're kind of breaking out that thing into sections that look like a finger. So there's this way that we could go about doing this. I'd rather, instead of using the scale from those directions, I just want to take these individual edge loops here and just bump them out. So I'm going to take this one and bump this out, take this one, bump this up, because I want to keep these edges flat for right now. Okay. So just think about how you try to make this a little bit more round, right? And then what I want you to do next is add in some more edge loops. Okay. So you're going back to multi-cut, and you are going to cut in an edge loop on each side of one of these sections. The reason we do that is for animation purposes and for like posing purposes. Everywhere where you want to bend a piece of geometry, if you don't have enough geometry there to bend, it's just going to almost fold. So I'll give you an example, right? So let's say this finger had a rig in it, and we try to start animating this. See how not fluid that is if we're trying to bend that finger. Okay. Now let's see what happens when I add in some more edge loops. So if I'm here and here, okay, and we try to do the same thing. So we go to, you know, vertex mode, and we're here. And now we rotate from that same point. Make sure I have all of my vertices selected. See how much more fluid that is? Right? There's a little bit of breaking that's happening there, so you may want to end up bending from this point. But you have a lot more range of motion here. And then you do some weight painting and things to make sure that that doesn't get busted, right? But that's a lot more fluid, okay? So at each one of these sections, when do you model with the 1 key off? I don't model in the 3 key. This is your smooth mode preview. I use the smooth object preview to see what it will look like when it's smooth. And we will do this as we get down the line. We're going to work to smooth. Okay. But for right now, I'm going to just leave it in the 1 key right now, which is the 1 key on your keyboard. But we will be checking smooth to see how it looks when it's smooth, just to make sure our finger looks good. So good question. Okay, so I'm going to take my multi-cut tool and I'm going to cut in a couple more edge loops at each one of these finger bends. Okay, so right here and right here, we'll cut in a couple of edge loops, and then as well as here and here. And I may bump these out just a little bit by double clicking and moving, double clicking and moving. Okay. So we're there. The next step that I'd like to do is I'm going to break each one of the finger sections in half, okay? Just to give me some more geometry. So I'm going to go here, and each one of these sections, these bigger sections of fingers, I'm going to cut an edge loop right in half for these, okay? Do it there and there. So now you should have, you know, quite a few edge loops running through here, okay? And then what I'm going to do is actually go about starting to shape this finger, okay? So here's where I'm going to use the side view. So I'm going to jump to my side view by hitting space bar. I'm going to go back to my side view by hovering over this view and hitting space bar. So now I'm in a side view. I'm going to jump to vertex mode by right clicking and holding, going to vertex mode. And I'm going to start kind of shaping out this finger, right? So everywhere where that finger kind of bends, I'm going to pull these up, right? Okay. So right here is the back of my finger, right? If I'm looking at this, this is the front, this is the tip of my finger. So I'm also going to do something here where I'm going to pull this out, start trying to get the tip of the finger, as well as pulling, if I jump back to my isometric view, I'm going to take these two vertices on the sides and push these back, right? So really I only pulled out the tip of the finger here, okay? Now I'll jump back to my side view. This gives me a little bit better manipulation of this, as well as the ability to kind of shape the tip of the finger, okay? And I might even pull some of these up. Just depending on how you want the tip of that finger to look, okay? And you can kind of look at your own finger and determine how you want that to look and feel. I'm going to pull this down here, even pull this. You can even look at your own finger as well and kind of determine how that shape looks on the top. And what I'm doing is marquee selecting multiple vertices, right? So that I'm getting the backside faces as well. And just think about the shape, the overall shape of your finger, right? And then you can also think about, okay, maybe this needs to move a little bit more this way. Maybe that second section of my finger is a little bit, you know, shorter, right? This piece here to the next bend, right? So maybe even this needs to shift. And you can jump back to your top down view or your isometric view, and then also look at it from the top, right? Because your top view is going to be affected too, right? So check your top view here. So try to round the tip of that finger out maybe a little bit. Selection method is just marquee selection, right? So I'm just clicking and dragging. Good question. Clicking and dragging over multiple vertices just to select multiples, right? And I know that it will select the back facing ones too, so that's why I do that. And I hold shift to select more than just one. And then you can kind of check the So just kind of work on getting that finger shape, right? I'm going to jump back to my side view. And how I moved my pivot, somebody else asked that in the class or in the section, was if I hit W and my pivot's here, if I hit the D key, D as in dog, now I have the ability to move my pivot. If I want to reset that pivot, I just, out in the open space, I just click and it should reset. So if I pull that pivot wherever I want and hit the D key, it will set the pivot to that point. And then I can hit D and reset and it should send it back to its default location. So that's how you move the pivot for the person that asked in the chat. Okay, so the next thing I want to check too is the smooth version of this finger. So if I'm here, what I'm going to do is hit my 3 key on my keyboard. So if I hit 3, you can kind of look how it looks in smooth mode. I'm going to turn off my wireframe so you just kind of see how that finger looks. And that's feeling a little weird, so I might want to adjust how this looks a little bit. So maybe this needs to kind of come up a little bit more in conjunction. And this whole fingertip might need to just kind of shrink down a little bit in reality. I also want the creases to be there in that finger, so I'm going to take these two points and just kind of move them closer to one another. When you have edges like this and you want a crease in the finger, by moving these two edges closer to one another, when you put an object into smooth mode, it doesn't allow them to smooth as much. So you'll see that that crease forms a little bit easier. Let's shift this down. I also don't want this fingertip to be so rounded off. So maybe we'll go something like this. From the top view, we're going to do another thing here, and I'm going to show you a tool called vertex snap. So you see that these two vertices aren't quite lined up. If I hit W and hold V, I can do what's called a vertex snap. So I can snap it to try to line it up with this other side. Same thing here. I can hold V, just kind of snap it. That way I can get my stuff relined back up. How to exit smooth mode is by hitting the 1 key. So I can hit the 3 key to enter smooth mode, the 1 key to exit smooth mode. Good question. So 1 is your unsmooth, and then 3 is what's called smooth mesh preview. So it just kind of shows you how it looks when it's smoothed. Okay. Cool. All right, so there's 1. Okay, so I also from the front kind of want to go to my object front view here and try to snap some of these things back into place too, because I know it's not lined up from the front either. So let's go W, hold V, just gonna snap that back into place, snap that one back into place, just kind of realign some of these things a little bit. And with a finger, the nice thing is that I don't mind if it's super symmetrical. Like, I'm not super worried about it. But, yeah. What I do want to be able to do is use this as a basis for all the other fingers. So, if I can make this kind of a default finger and then turn it into all my other ones, that's kind of the goal. So, I do want to elongate this just a little bit. Just because it's feeling a little stubby. So, I'm going to elongate it just a little bit. That's feeling a lot better. Okay. I'm going to hit the 3 key on there. That's feeling a lot like a finger right now to me. So now that we've got kind of the base of this finger, the next thing I want to do is there's a display mode that I like to leave on just in poly mode, where I hit mesh display and hit harden edge, because I just like to see the finger in like a hard polygon edge mode like this. And then when I hit smooth mode, I want that to go away, right? So now I can see all my hard polygon edges like that just by clicking on the object and hitting mesh display harden edge. Okay, cool. Now there's another tool that I'm going to introduce to you. So take your finger and just kind of leave it there for a second and drop in a new cube. Okay. Before we, destroy our finger that we just spent a good 30-ish minutes on, I'd like to introduce you to a new tool. Okay. Because we're about to use it on our finger a couple of times. That tool is called extrude. Okay. Some of you may have already used it, but for those of you that's new to Maya, this will be a little bit new. Okay. So extruding, you can think of it as almost creating a new set of faces from a face you have selected, right? So if I hit extrude while I have a face selected, right? I'm in object face mode, right? So if I click extrude, which is either here on the toolbar or over here in your modeling toolkit, you see a little button that says extrude. I click that. Okay. You'll see this ring that pops up around your move tool, and as well as this little poly extrude menu that pops up. If you pull on this, right now, it's going to essentially take that face that you have and extrude or pull it out of the other face. So see now that it's adding a new set of faces around here. Okay. I'll do this again just so you can kind of see how this works, right? If I hit G, it's just going to redo the last command. So G as in goat. Okay. If I hit G, it's going to redo the extrude, and I just pull this out, right? The cool thing with extrudes is you can also use them while scaling. So if I hit G and then I hit the R key, you'll see that I'm still in my extrude because this face is still selected. I can hit R and scale down. Right now I'm adding the new faces in the flat plane. And if I hit G again to extrude again, I can pull that out, right? So now I can kind of create some really intricate, unique shapes by using this extrude, right? So it's also can be very detrimental if you're not keeping track of where your extrusions are at. You start getting what's called hidden faces, okay? And lamina faces, which can cause a lot of issues. They can be very frustrating to new Maya users because it will look like your object's just fine, but in reality, it's not. There's something happening to your object, and it can be very frustrating, okay? So you can see how quickly you can create very unique shapes by using the extrude tool. And we're about to use it here to work on the knuckles as well as the nail, okay? So that's extrude. So in order to use extrude here, we're first going to do it on the knuckles, okay? So what I want to do is just kind of start prepping this area to put a knuckle in, right? So if you look at the kind of that little piece of your finger right there, as well as the tip of your finger, right? We're going to start trying to build in a little bit of that shape, okay? So your knuckle is not a square, right? If you're looking at your own hand as a reference, unless you're like an automaton robot, your knuckle kind of has like a rounded shape, right? So I'm going to take the area where I'm going to extrude and just kind of prep this by going into vertex mode. I'm going to click these. And I'm going to scale them out, right? I'm just going to kind of move them and get them more rounded, okay? And it doesn't have to be drastic, right? You could click and kind of move them and round them out just a little bit. Okay. And then what I want to do is take this area that we just kind of rounded out by moving our vertices in face mode, and I'm going to hit extrude. Okay, so I click these faces by holding shift. While I'm in face mode, I'm going to hit extrude. Then I'm going to hit R to scale, and I'm going to scale it down, right? And I'm just going to kind of leave this there for right now because I want to hit 3 key, right? And I just kind of want to see how that looks, right? Because when your finger's extended, right, that's kind of folded up on the sides a little bit. So then you might want to take some of these edges and start pulling some of these up, right? To get the look of that knuckle, right? Maybe you take this vertex here and pull this up. But you're trying to get the look of that knuckle on the back here. And it's not crazy intricate. Like, I don't need you to do the rings on your knuckle, right? You have all these wrinkles. I'm not super worried about that. But we just want to get the shape, okay? So if we can get the shape of that knuckle, that's what we're trying to achieve, right? And I don't want to see like this, right? You don't need a huge freaking knuckle back here unless your fingers are really bony or the character you're designing is, right? You don't need something that looks like this, because when you hit the 3 key, it's going to look something like that, and that's just not what you want, right? But give yourself some geometry there to make it look proper. So I think I've got something there that looks okay right now. Okay. And now I'm going to go here. I'm going to just pop this key off so I quit tapping it, because I keep tapping it. I'm just going to pop it off so I stop touching it. Okay. Okay, so the next one is we're going to do the knuckle up here, right? Same kind of step, same kind of thought process. So we take these vertices here and go like this, take this one here and go like this, take this one here and here, kind of scoot these out a little bit. Okay, then I'm going to click these faces, select these by holding shift. Or I'm going to show you another way. If you hold tab, you'll see that you can paint select. So if I click and just drag around, it will select multiples for me as well, which is kind of nice just by holding tab. So if you're in face mode and you hold tab, you can select. You can also hold tab and deselect. Kind of nice. Change your perspective window into a top-down window and don't know how to fix it. Oh, no worries. So if you hold space and click, right, and hold, you can see that, like, if I change this into a front view, if I hold space and then click and drag, I can change it back to perspective view. It's pretty easy. Yeah, hold space, left click, you can select perspective view. Should be able to get it back for you. Okay, so did I already hit extrude? I did not. Okay, so I'm going to hit extrude after I have these faces selected. We're going to do the same thing here, right? Just kind of build this knuckle right here. So we'll pull this up just a little bit, nothing too crazy. Then we'll come in here and start pulling up some of these verts. And I might have done that knuckle one far back from where I wanted to. Yeah, I did. Let's undo that real quick. I actually want that to be here. Because I want it to be right on the bend, like the other one was. So we'll do it right here. So we'll go here and here. Let's scoot these out a little bit. Same with here and here. Now we'll do the same extrusion. Okay. So extrude, R to scale down. And then we can kind of start pulling some of those up. We'll go here, something like this. Pull this up. Okay. Then if you hit smooth, it should look something like this. Might want to adjust these a little bit just to, might bring these back in just a hair. Might even bring them back here just a hair too, so they're not so rounded. Don't mind if this part's round, but kind of follow the look of the finger. Okay. Cool. So we have those knuckles in there. The next step that I'd like to do here is do the nail. The nail is kind of a two-part process, right? So we have our finger here, right? We've got this kind of finger being set up. Okay. The nail is the next step. So what I want to do for the nail is it's kind of a two-part extrusion. So the first piece is I'm actually going to take this nail bed and kind of adjust this a little bit, right? So I do want to take the knuckle back a little bit here, but I want to adjust this nail bed in a way where I can get the nail shape proper. And your nail's a little curved, right? So I'm going to take these faces here now, and I'm going to hit extrude, okay? And we're just going to build the nail bed, right? So if you look at your finger, we're just building the nail bed underneath, okay? So we're just extruding that, right? And then this is a little bit tricky, and it's kind of a you know, it's a little bit cheating, but it works well and looks pretty good for what you're trying to do. So I'm going to hit extrude again, and I'm just going to hit E on the keyboard and rotate it back on itself. Okay. And you'll see that kind of creates this nail looking piece, and you can move it up if you want. I kind of like to just leave it rotated where it was sitting like this. And then you can adjust that nail if you want. If you're doing like a female character, you'll see how it looks when you hit smooth. It ends up looking pretty good for a nail, right? Gives you the nail bed piece and the shape here. If you were to put a texture on that, it would look just fine, right? Okay. So I'll do that step one more time, just in case you missed it. Just to reiterate. So we've got our faces selected. I want to make sure I did not extrude that yet. Okay, so I'm here. I'm going to hit extrude. I'm just going to create the nail bed, right? So if I'm here, I'm just building the nail bed for my finger. Okay. And then I'm going to hit extrude one more time, and I'm going to hit E and rotate it back on itself. And that's all it is to get that nail shape. And when you hit smooth, it should look pretty decent. Okay. The nice thing here is that if you wanted to do a female character, all you need to do is take the two edges here for faces and extrude. You can give your character a little bit longer nails, which is kind of cool. So if you wanted to do something like that and hit the 3 key, now you can see you've got like a longer nail to work with. And you could adjust this to make it, you know, if they had like acrylic nails or something, you could make it look very much like a nail, right? So that's how you can go about doing that. Okay. For me, I'm just going to leave it like a character who trims their fingernails. Okay. Might adjust this just a little bit to make it a little bit more rounded off. Sell that nail look a little bit more. Okay. So there's your one finger. This finger is pretty much ready to get shipped and attached to whatever else we're working on. Okay. So the nice thing is we're going to prep this finger as, you know, the rest of our, you know, we're going to use these for the rest of our fingers too. So what I want to do that is I'm going to take the finger in face mode, hold tab, and just delete out these backside faces, because this is going to get attached to a hand, right? And then I'm going to take this finger, I'm going to hit Control D, which is duplicate. I'm going to drag one off over here to the side. Then I'm going to take this finger and hit Control D, put one here, hit Control D, put one here. And then I'm going to hit Control D and put one right here. So we have 4 fingers. Okay. I'm going to scoot them over, kind of center them, make sure my spacing's similar. we should have 4 fingers. Okay. This one over here, we're going to end up using for the thumb, or my thing too is that if you have one good finger and something ends up breaking on your model over here, then you have a finger that you can use to try to fix them. And it's saved students' butts in the past, so I do it all the time now. Okay. Might just elongate these just a little bit, which means I need to take this one, Control D one of these, and put it over here. Okay. So we should have 5 really nice looking fingers now, right? This one we're going to use for a thumb, so we'll do that in a little bit. The next step that I want to do is I want to take these. I'm going to drop in a new cube. Okay. We are going to take this cube and scale it up, right, to the size of our hand, right? We're going to flatten this out. Move this up, move it back a little bit. This is going to end up turning into the palm of our hand. Okay. There's some things that I want to do here first though. So the first thing I want to do is in face mode, I want to take this and hit V and move and and snap it to the top of our fingers here, just so they line up, right? I'm trying to make sure these fingers line up. Then I'm going to take this one, hit V, snap it to the side of our finger, so that face lines up, because I want them all to line up, right? Take this face, hit W, hold V, snap it to this side, right? So I'm just hovering over the farthest edge of our base of our finger, right? I'm going to do the same thing on the bottom side. So you can even pull this down and just to see how that snaps, right? Snapping it to that one right there. So now those should line up with no issue, okay? That cube should be the same height as the base of our finger, which is great. Now, with this cube, I want to chop this up in such a way that I can now attach the fingers to this cube, right? So I'm going to take my multi-cut tool and I'm just going to start cutting in some edge loops on our cube here. So I'm going to hold Control and I'm going to cut one at each kind of intersection of all these fingers, right? So I want to chop it up like that, right? Because I want to be able to attach the fingers, and I want there to be a little bit of a gap in between those fingers. I don't want to just put one edge loop and then attach the fingers to both sides, because then you get these weird webs between your fingers. And technically we want a little bit of space to try to get that. There is a web there, but there's a little bit of a gap in between each finger, right? So that's what we're going to try to do. So we're leaving those there. And if you really want to be precise, which you should want to be precise, take that edge loop, double click it, hit W, hold V as in virtual, and you're going to snap it to the side of your finger. Okay, you're going to do that with all of these here. So you're going to make sure all these line up with the sides of your finger that you've placed. Okay, so I'm hitting W, holding V, snapping it to there. Same thing here, double click, hold V, snap. Just panning over now, hitting W, holding V, snap, double click that one, snap. Okay. So all those should be lined up with our fingers there. Okay. Next thing, if I want to attach this finger to this part of this box, I need to have equal amounts of sides. So this is where our poly count indicator up here at the top can come in handy, right? So if I click on my finger here and I double click this edge loop at the base of my finger and look up here to edges, how many do I have selected? I have 8, right? So right now at the base of this finger, all I've got is 1, 2, 3, 4. That's not going to work. I can't connect 8 edges to 4 edges. It's just, it won't work. Okay. So I got to have a matchup. So how do I go about doing that? Well, what I can do is cut each one of these cube pieces in half directly, right? So if I hold control and cut it in half, and then take this W, or this edge loop, hit W, hold V and snap it to the center of my finger. Now what? Now I've got how many? Well, if we come in here and count, I should have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay. So that's good. We're getting closer. But how do we get the last 2 edges in there to make sure that these line up? Well, if you look, we're missing an edge loop right here that wraps around the whole cube. So what I'd like to do is click on multi-cut, right? Hold control and then shift and try to drop this in the center of that, which should perfectly line up with our fingers. Okay. And if you just want to double check and make sure it lines up, you could even double click on that edge loop, move it down, hold V, and then snap it to the center of the fingers. But it should line up. Okay. Then we're just missing the edge loop that cuts through the center of each one of these sections too. Okay. So we'll do this real fast. We'll just cut. And the reason I did them offset is just to show you how to snap again. So if I hit W, I double click this edge loop, hit W, hold V. I can snap to the middle of the finger. Double click, hold V, snap to the middle of the finger. Double click, hold V, snap to the middle of the finger. Okay. So now we should have 4 spots in which we can connect our finger to our would-be palm, right? Some things I kind of want to do first is I want to take an edge loop through the center of this just to kind of break this up. And then I also want to add one near the bottom here. Okay. And then I also want to add one more right here. Right? Because we're going to build some knuckles where our hand's attached, right? We could also start trying to shape this like a palm. Granted, we still need to add a thumb on there, but it's not bad to kind of start shaping some stuff. So we could take our vertices and kind of start making this look a little bit more like a finger or a hand in general. A little bit easier to shape things before you start working, right? You could even come to the side view and start kind of shaping out your hand just to get it a little bit more in line with what a palm looks like. If you just kind of look at your palm from the side, right? They kind of taper off towards the fingers. Granted, we'll want to leave this here for now, and then we'll move those once we get the fingers attached. But you could come down here and kind of do something like this. Make sure you're getting your hand's not a flat, you know, shape right there. Come in here and do this. Just try to get your hand in a good shape, right? And then you could take these, this edge and try to round out your palm a little bit. And granted, I might have just messed something up over here where I didn't have something selected properly, so I might step back just a step. Make sure I'm in a side view when I do this. I also want to take all these faces at the bottom of the hand right here and delete these, because that's where your wrist is going to attach to the rest of your hand, right? So it could also be worth like taking your faces here and using what's called soft select, right? But we'll talk about soft select in a bit, because I'd like to start rounding out the shape of our hand here a little bit before we go through here. But let's get the fingers attached and then we'll start doing that stuff, okay? So I'm going to take from a side view here. So don't worry about soft select quite yet. Okay. So let's get these fingers attached. So what I want to do here is I'm going to show you a new tool. We're going to hit Control-1 on our keyboard. What that does is isolates the object you have selected, right? So if I click on the palm, hit Control-1, it will isolate that object, right? I'm also noticing that I've really messed up this edge of this palm right here. So let's try to straighten some things back out here real quick. Just snapping some stuff back together. You can also use a scale to try to fix this, where you hit R, just kind of scale everything back flat. I'm going to try to do that with this too real fast. That does not look right. And then we'll readjust these if we need to. Once we get the fingers attached, that looks a little bit better. Okay, cool. All right, so to get these fingers attached, what I want to do here is take each kind of 4-face section where those fingers are going to attach and delete these faces out, okay? We're going to leave the little webbing in between, right? But delete those out. And then we're going to hit Control-1 and unisolate those, right? Then what we want to do here, there's a couple different ways we can go about attaching these fingers. What I'd like to do is bring the palm to the fingers, right? Because we already have the shape of the finger correct. And I'd like the palm to be more in line with the finger, right? So I'm going to take all 4 fingers here by going to object mode and marquee selecting over them. I'm going to hit W, just kind of move them back towards the palm, okay? And then we're going to do what's called a target weld, okay? So in order to target weld these objects together to make these one object, right? Maya first requires you to combine all objects together before you can start welding them together, right? Because if I try to target weld the fingers to this object, it won't weld them together and turn them into one object. We have to do that manually first, okay? So what I want to do is marquee select all our fingers and our palm and hit mesh combine. It's also over here in your modeling toolkit, so you can just hit combine, okay? You'll see that now they're all selectable as one object, which is great. Okay, then we're going to use another tool over here in the target weld column, okay? And we're going to start target welding. So what the target weld does is it's going to allow us to take a vertice, click and drag it to another one, and then it will weld those 2 points together, which in turn, you know, creates a solid connection there. And now that's one vertice. We can move that, adjust that, and do everything we need to. Okay. So I'm just going to target weld all the way around. Just bringing the palm to our fingers. Okay. So there's one finger attached. So now we'll jump to the next one. And we'll just do this by rotating around, target welding, clicking and dragging all of these verts all the way around. Okay. Same thing here. Very nice. Next one. Boom. And now all of those fingers are attached to our palm, and we can go about taking some time to massage how this looks. Okay, because that connection is a little bit weird right now, right? We go from a really rounded finger to a very square palm. So what I'd like to do is take a minute and just kind of adjust this. Might mean taking some of these verts and letting those relax. I'm just trying to round this up a little bit, right? So now we should have, you know, a pretty solid start to that hand. How do you manipulate the layout move tool window around? Oh, move tool, move windows around. With Alt, left click will allow you to rotate. Okay. Alt middle mouse button allows you to pan, right? And then zoom is with the scroll wheel. And then Alt right mouse button is your scrub zoom. So you can get a little bit more precise. Hopefully that's what you're asking. I'm going to take this and kind of move this up a little bit. And then I'm going to add one more edge loop in here, right here. So I'm going to hold control, click, and drop that edge loop right here, because this is where we're going to build those knuckles, right? And even at this point, you can kind of start looking from a side view. And if you need to, you can take your finger and move this out of the way for a minute. You start looking at how this is shaped, how your fingers are lining up towards your palm, right? This is where you can manipulate that even further. Really start looking into that palm shape. If you want to add more edge loops, you can through here. Remember that your hand is not just a flat object, right? So trying to get things tapered properly and moved. Right. Then when you check it in smooth, things should start feeling a lot better, right? We're getting somewhere, right? Granted, our fingers are all the same length, which they're not going to be. We're going to adjust a lot of these, right? So no worries there, but we're getting somewhere. We're starting with a hand that's starting to look like a hand. Again, what I want to do is hit mesh display and hit harden edge, just because I like to be able to see those polygon edges, right? Gives me a better feel of where I'm at. And then I think we got to this point a little bit quicker than I thought we were, which is okay. But what I'd like to do, I'm just going to center this object. What I'd like to do from here is give you guys time to do this and work on it and watch the video back. So I'm going to call it good right here, because I don't want to go much further. Next week we're going to add the thumb and then work on posing and stuff. But I want you guys to just, if you get to this point for this week, this is where I want your check-in to be. So if we go to our canvas page and just check this for a minute. I'll show you kind of what to submit for your week, your weekly check-in. So let's come here. And we need to talk about an attendance question, so we'll put that up here as well. So if you come to your assignments for 3600 and you go to week 1 attendance, that's fine. And then week 3 check-in will be, oh, not till the, when did I put that? June 1st, so next week. Yeah, that's great. So actually, don't worry about it. Week 3 will be after next class. So you don't have a week 1 check-in. You'll have a week 3 check-in, which is fine. So you don't have anything to turn in for today, but get to this point so that next week you're not trying to start from scratch, right? And then after next week, once we have the thumb and kind of posed, the hand posed, right? A little bit, we'll go from there, okay? So we're ending a little bit early, which is okay. It's a 2-hour video, so I don't want to kill you guys with that. So if you need to scrub through and watch some things back, as soon as I end the stream, that video will post and go live and you can watch it back. So give you guys some lab time to work for the rest of class. That's kind of the format that we'll probably end up doing for the rest of the semester. So I don't know if every week will be a 3-hour video. It'll probably be, 2 hours, maybe a little bit longer, depending on what we're working on for that day. And then you'll have a little bit of lab time to watch the video back. Okay. If you need questions or need stuff from me in the meantime, make sure you're hitting me up on the Discord. Okay. Yes, there will be a week 2 attendance question. Let's see. So we are going to go to Notepad here and we will say, week 2 attendance answer is going to be extrusion tool. Okay, so that's what you're going to type in. Okay, so if everything's good, go ahead and keep working on this, get to this point for this week so that next week you're in a good spot to keep moving forward. Okay. No quiz, no, but you do have an attendance question, right? So it's this right here. So the extrusion tool under your week 2 attendance, you'll just throw in extrusion tool as your answer for that, okay? Can you move around the toolbars? Yes, you can. So let's say you want to move the poly modeling tab. I don't know if you can move the shelf, but if you want to move like your modeling toolkit, you can move it off somewhere. You can move the attribute editor. You can move your channel box layer editor. You can put them over here if you want. You can anchor them down at the bottom, I think, too. Where can you anchor these? I know you can anchor them certain places. But let's say you have another screen and you want to throw these on your other screen. Just so you have more real estate here to work with, you can do that. You can move your toolbar, you can move the outliner. So you can do that, right? So I'm pretty sure I could put the channel box layer editor over here if I wanted to. I could put the outliner in here as well. So yeah, you can fully customize where things are at, right? Just depends on where you want those things to go. So if your toolbox is here, right? So I've got channel box now is over here, outliners here, right? So just depends on where you want stuff to go. I'm going to put them back on the default side though, because that's where I'm used to them being at. Okay, there we go. Oh, the attendance question. Yeah, attendance question is just extrusion tool. Okay, everybody, we're gonna call it for today. Okay. So if you have questions, let me know. Hit me up in the Discord. Your TA should be available as well. Thanks everybody for being attentive and asking questions. It's been a good stream. And I will catch you guys next week. Okay. Thanks everybody. We'll see ya.